Very good evening, everyone. So we are back again with our another session for the week. So we'll be continuing our last week session in today's session. That would be our accounting Excel import. So I'll just quickly share my screen and relook on the reports that we covered. So we were talking about the accounting Excel import, where in my phase 1, we completed the bill, cost center, GST and property part via Excel. So what are we going to cover in today's session? We'll just have a quick recap of that. So we are going to cover the bank details, how to add the bank description via Excel import. These are the details which reflects at the time of manual entries. The other one comes the plus icon. Whenever we are updating any debit note or credit note in the books of accounts, we are supposed to fill these all reference details so that it will help us in our GSTR to be the matching part. The other one that we'll be learning, that would be the applying the BRS date at the time of Excel import as well. That means we'll be doing the entries of bank via Excel import, as well as at the same time, we'll make sure that we reconcile all those entries at the time of import itself. And the last part that we'll be covering today, that would be the IRN number, for updating the IRN number via Excel import. So usually what happens that we are supposed to book the entries in the books of accounts, and then from the options of e-invoice available under transaction compliance section of RealBooks financial module, we are supposed to generate the IRN or the e-invoice in the books of accounts itself once the entry is posted. But in case if you are if you are new to RealBooks and you want to post the entries for which the IRN is already generated in the GST portal, for those kind of transactions, if you want to have a data capturing part of those IRN number against those entries, you can do the same thing via Excel import. So this is just an information purpose part. So we'll be just covering these all details in our phase 2 part. So starting with today's session, the regular part, we are supposed to go to transactions, import, export, import. So we'll be finding the accounts voucher option over here, and then we are supposed to download the template and make all the necessary changes or the entries updation in the Excel part. And then we are supposed to browse the Excel over here and upload directly. So I have made already prepared few Excel, so I'll just go through that. So this is the Excel that we'll be preparing at the time for importing the entries in the books of accounts, as well as we are supposed to capture all the bank descriptions in the books of accounts. So what are we supposed to take care at the time of import? First of all, we just need to make sure that the bank description option is enabled from the settings option. And then post that, if you're making the necessary changes and importing the data in books of accounts, you'll be able to view all those bank description in the books itself. So I have prepared over here 2 types of entries. One is the contra entry. So again, we need to make sure that we are updating a correct voucher serial number and the ledger reference number. So for first voucher or first one entry, we are supposed to book the debit and credit part, which should match with each other. Otherwise, my Excel will give an error at the time of import of entries. So this is my first voucher, where I have updated as the voucher serial number as 1. Date I have updated of today's date. I am not giving the voucher number because the number part over here is auto increment without reset. And the first transaction that I'm going to do is for contra. Narration, you can update it as per your requirement. And the ledger reference number, again, the debit and credit is supposed to reflect over here. In my debit, I am updating State Bank of India with an amount of 100 rupee and HDFC Bank as credit with the amount of 100 rupee. Then what we are supposed to take care, we are supposed to take care that we have updated the correct company GSTI number in the Excel. So what is the company GSTI number? Just having a quick review of that. Settings, configuration, compliance, GST business place. So over here, since this particular segment has been assigned with this particular highlighted GSTI number, so this becomes my company GSTI number or voucher GSTI number, which I'm supposed to update in my Excel correctly as it is. And the same goes for the ledger as well. I mean, my ledger should be exactly what is updated in my RealBooks financial model. Any extra space or a different character in the ledgers will give an error at the time of import of entries. So we are done with the voucher sheet part. Then comes the bill part. Since we are using only the bank ledger, so bill is not reflecting, will not come in this particular first voucher ka scenario. And in the second voucher, what we are trying to do is we are updating one receipt entry over where I am debiting State Bank of India, which is with an amount of 1400, and Zomato Limited, which is again a party in the books of accounts, as 1400 as credit. Same goes with the company GSTI number. We need to update it because this is in future going to help us to take out the data GST wise, GST number wise or business place wise. But since we are using a party ledger over here for which the bill app is enabled, we are supposed to update the voucher bill sheet as well. So over here, you can see my ledger reference number is 2. My voucher serial number is 2. So in my V-bill sheet, my voucher serial number and the ledger reference number should also be 2. But the serial number would be 1 because this is the first row of this particular sheet. Then comes the bill reference number, bill date, amount. And since I have updated the party ledger on the credit side, I am supposed to update the amount type as credit. And in my against reference part, I am updating it as an advance. In case if you want to tag any specific bill for which the bill is already created in the books of accounts, you can simply type over here as Y, which stands for against reference. So all those details are reflecting in this sheet as itself. Then comes the VCC invoice. We are not bothered about that. GST is also not reflecting over here. Now comes the bank sheet, the bank description, that what we were talking about. So now over here in my voucher sheet, I am using for first voucher serial number, I am using 2 banks that is standing for contra entry. So I have to update the bank description for both the banks, which is one is for State Bank of India and HDFC Bank, carrying the ledger reference number as 1 and 2 respectively. Coming back to the bank sheet, we are supposed to update the voucher serial number as it is what is updated in my voucher sheet. So it needs to be updated as 1. Ledger reference number 1 and 2, State Bank of India and HDFC respectively, and the instrument type. Now over here, when I create any entries from my books of accounts, we find multiple instrument type in the books. For example, I am selecting one bank. So over here, you are finding check, NEFT, RTGS, DD, cash, electronic transfer, bank transfer, and so on. So you just need to make sure that whatever you are typing or updating in the instrument type sheet, that needs to be updated as it is what is reflecting in front of your screen right now. If you are not giving the data in an uppercase and updating the Excel in a lowercase, then the Excel will not import successfully. Next comes the instrument number. So based on your instrument type, you can update the instrument number, which will then help you for the reconciliation part. Then comes the instrument date type. And since the instrument type is not check, so you need not update anything in the post-dated check option. And the bank description is completely optional. In case if you want to give the bank description, what you will be viewing in your statement, accordingly, you can update it or you can just completely leave it as blank. So this was all about my first voucher that I have updated in the voucher sheet. The second comes, in the second entry, I am trying to import the receipt entry for which I have debited State Bank of India with an amount of 1400. Now this time in my bank sheet, I will be giving the voucher serial number as 2, ledger reference number as 1. And this time I'm giving the instrument type as check, the instrument number, instrument date. Do I need to enable or disable or click a checkbox for the post-dated check? Over here, I'm updating it as N because I don't want this to be imported as in post-dated check. So we are good to go for our Excel import part with these details getting captured in my Excel import. So I'll just quickly save the Excel, come back to my books of accounts, transactions, import, export, import, accounts voucher, browse, bank description import, open, and upload. I have imported the data in my books of accounts successfully. I will click over here and my data reflects over here since it's automatically opening the daybook over here. So I'll just click on the bank details and BRS date option over here. So as you can see, whatever I updated in my Excel sheet, all are reflecting over here clearly, the way I imported via Excel. So I'll quickly edit one transaction. So here I can see the bank details part getting captured the way I updated in my Excel sheet, and the bank description is also reflecting as it is. Same goes for the other ledger as well. And for the other entry, which was the receipt entry, the same goes over here. So this was the bank description part. Now I want that since I'm doing so much of effort in updating my bank description and all details at the time of import itself, so why can't I have a feature of updating the reconciling the entries at the time of import itself? So what we are supposed to do, again, I have prepared the same Excel file as it is. So this is the Excel where I have updated the exactly entry, the exact contra entry, receipt, whatever is updated. The only difference in this particular Excel sheet is the BRS date in my U column. So over here, I want to update the BRS at the time of, I want to reconcile my transaction at the time of import itself. So since I am using two banks at the time of import, so I will be updating the BRS date for both of my two banks. And for the next entry, I do not want to update, I do not want to reconcile this particular transaction. So I will keep it as blank. So rest all the information are as same as what was updated in my previous Excel sheet. So now let's import it in our books of accounts. We'll go to transactions, import, export, and import. Accounts voucher, browse, bank description with BRS import, and upload. So over here at the time of import, if you want to update the branch, since I'm not using the branch field today, as I showed this field last day itself, so you can use the branch column over here. Like for example, if you want to import the transaction in different segments, so whatever branch or segment names you are updating over in your Excel file, it will get imported in that particular segment. So my entry is imported successfully. Let's check how my entry looks like once the entry is imported. The same options, bank details and description. This was the entry I tried to reconcile at the time of import. Now this is freezed. I cannot edit or any changes cannot be made. In my bank details, if I see all the details are captured correctly the way I wanted it to get captured. And what about my second entry? Since I did not want to reconcile this particular transaction, my bank is not freezed. So the reconciliation is not done for this particular entry. Let's check in our BRS report, reports, accounts, daily reports, and bank reconciliation. The bank ledger that we'll be choosing is State Bank of India, and search. BRS entries, options, all entries. So these were the entries that I tried to import and tried reconciling at the time of import. So it got reconciled over here. Now, in case if I made any mistake in my Excel and now I want to delete the BRS done entries, but this may hamper my reconciliation because if my reconciliation is matched with my bank statement, and if I try to delete, let's see what does my system alerts. it says Excel cannot be deleted. Why it cannot be deleted? Because you have imported the Excel file with the transactions of contra and receipt, and at the same time, you have reconciled the entry. If you're reconciling any one entry also pertaining to that particular Excel file, your Excel will not be allowed to delete. But this was in case, what if you have just made a mistake at the time of importing? You want this to be deleted, and again, you want the correct file to be imported. What's the alternative of this error? So we do have the options over here. There is an options under settings, configuration, accounts, import, check voucher lock before Excel delete. The same applies for the bill tagging part as well as the BRS part, or any locking part which is done after the import. If you want to delete the Excel file forcefully, you can just disable this toggle button from here and come back to the import export list. So this was my Excel file. Now I would like to delete this. The Excel got deleted successfully. So over here, if the toggle button is enabled, you won't be allowed because it's completely locked. And in case if the toggle button is disabled, you can delete any Excel file imported, which is not supposed to be deleted just for a certain locking part in the financial model. So this was all about the bank description part. Coming next to the next part is my debit note, for which I said it will help me in my GSTR to BICA matching. Okay, so this is the Excel file that I prepared with respect to the debit note. Over here, again, I am uploading only one transaction. So my all voucher serial number would be 1. Then comes the voucher date, voucher number. I'll keep it blank because my voucher numbering type is auto increment without reset. Then comes the voucher type, narration, ledger reference number. Again, in my first ledger, I have selected Ahuja Private Limited, which is a sundry debtors in nature. Then the electric expenses, which is indirect expenses in nature. SGST input and CGST input, which is tax in nature. So I've updated the debit and credit, making sure that there is no mismatch between the debit and credit amount in my Excel sheet. Then comes the company GST and the business place that is supposed to be updated correctly because this will result in my GST reports. Then comes the type. Now, what are these type? As in the beginning, I showed you that the plus icon at the time of doing transactions, there is a plus icon coming up in both for debit and credit. These details are supposed to be updated in via Excel. So let's check what all details needs to be captured over there. There comes a reason for issuing document. As per GST, currently this is a non-mandatory field, so you need not update these fields over here. You can simply start updating from the type part. Then comes a reference receipt against which the credit note has been issued and the reference receipt date. That's all. So once these details are updated, the next step, since this is a party ledger and the bill details has been enabled, so you need to make sure that you have updated the V-bill correctly, V-bill sheet correctly. Then comes my GST. Since I am using the GST ledgers over here, the ledger reference number would be 2 because I am importing the data and my GST should get calculated against electricity expenses, which is carrying the ledger reference number as 2. The rate part as 2.5, 2.5, and the CGST, SGST column needs to be updated correctly. And that's all. So we are good to go for importing the transaction in the books of accounts. Coming back to my books, I'll go to transactions, import, export, and import. Accounts voucher, browse, debit import, open, and upload. So over here, I have taken an example of importing my debit note entries. You can book all your debit credit entries in the same Excel and import it. and you can find the data as it is in the books of accounts, the way you update it in the Excel sheet. Till the file gets imported in the books, we will skip to the last option, the IRN part that I updated you in the previously in the beginning. This is the IRN column. In case if the IRN was already generated for those transactions before booking in the RealBooks, that is usually in our initial stage of implementation, then you can post all these IRN number over here and import it. This will be only and only for information purpose in the books of accounts, just for having a cross check or a cross view that, okay, the IRN was previously generated, not from RealBooks, but from some other or directly from GST portal. So this field can be used for importing the entries with IRN number. So this is the extra information that needs to be updated. Let's check if our Excel got imported. No, it still is pending. So once it will get imported, I'll just show you how the way it will look in the books of accounts. So for example, this is my debit note. This is the plus icon. We are updating the reference number, the reference receipt number, and the reference date over here. Since I have updated, say the bill number is APL-001. Now I'll go to transactions, compliance, and GSTR to be. I'll select the respective business place, the month as December, search. This is the invoice number that I updated via credit note. And this is the section would be updated as CDN. And if the JSON from the GST portal is updated over here, it will get automatically matched as per the information received in the books of accounts. So this was all about today's session. I would like to capture the other information of SEZ and FX entry in my next session so that we can just move slow and steady, and we'll learn the entire structure of Excel accounts, Excel import over here itself. So if any query relating to whatever we discussed today or in our previous session, please help me to make you more understand all the details in more details.
Varsha, what is the significance of that ledger reference number and the voucher serial number in each sheet? What is the relation between them?
Okay, great. Okay. So it's a good question coming up for the significance of ledger reference number first, and then coming the ledger voucher serial number. First, I'll continue with the voucher serial number part. The voucher serial number. Okay. This denotes that how many number of transactions I want to import in my books of accounts. Do I want to import one transaction? Do I want to import 100 transactions? Do I want to import 10,000 transactions via my Excel import? So over here, I have given an example of only one voucher. So this is becoming my one voucher. If you want to import it for 5 to 600 vouchers, then you need to make sure your voucher serial number is updated correctly. So one voucher serial number is capturing 4 ledger references over here in my example. Minimum 2 rows needs to be there. The ledger reference number needs to be there with the 2 rows. Now, why? Because any transaction that you are creating in the books of accounts, that it will be pertaining of debit and credit part. So one would be pertaining to debit and the other one would be pertaining to credit part. Now over here, since the GST is also coming up into the scenario, and that's the reason we are making a compound entry while import. So my first line or the first row in my Excel is my Voucher Private Limited. That means when the Excel gets imported and if you open the transaction, my first row will show me the first ledger, that is Voucher Private Limited. The second row will show the electric expenses, the third, the SGST, and the fourth as CGST. Now, what is the relation between the different sheets pertaining to the ledger reference number and voucher serial number? So for example, if I come to the V bill sheet, I am updating the bill of a party ledger. We cannot update the bill for GST ledger. We cannot update the bill for our income or expense ledger. So we just need to make sure that my party is holding which ledger reference for that particular voucher serial number. So in my example over here, the voucher serial number is 1. So my V bill also should have the voucher serial number as 1. The ledger reference number is updated as 1 because Ahuja is handling the, is linked with the ledger reference number as 1. In case if Ahuja Private Limited was updated over here and electricity expenses was updated in my first ledger reference number, then in my V bill, I will update the ledger reference number as 2. Because whatever is getting captured in my voucher sheet for the ledger reference number, voucher serial number, all has a linking with each other. In case if I'm giving a completely wrong number or a random number, my import will get stuck and it will give me an error that I am not importing the bill details for that particular party. So we need to make sure that my ledger reference number is correctly updated. And the same goes for the VCC sheet, the one which I explained last day. My voucher serial number and reference number needs to be updated as the way we are updating in my voucher sheet. Next comes the GST. GST over here, ledger reference number is 2. Now for the previous sheets, I asked you to update exactly same ledger reference number, but in my GST sheet, there is an exception. Then the GST, we need to capture the ledger reference number against which the GST is supposed to get computed. So over here, since as per my example, my electricity expenses was in my second is holding the ledger reference as 2. So the GST is supposed to get calculated on electricity expenses. So electricity expenses is holding the ledger reference number of 2. So in my GST sheet for both the ledgers or both the lines, I'm supposed to update the ledger reference number as 2. Now, why are we supposed to do this? Because when we update the transaction or when we create one entry in my RealBooks, we select this GST ledger and the GST pop-up comes out. Over here, the GST is computed against electricity expenses. So we are clicking on this particular checkbox of electricity expenses. And that's the reason while preparing the GST sheet, we need to make sure that we have updated the ledger reference number correctly against which the GST will get computed. Then comes the rate part. And for the bank sheet as well, the voucher serial number and ledger reference number needs to be as it is the way it is updated in my voucher sheet. Hope this answers your query.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So any other query? Please go ahead. I hope today's session is helpful for understanding the accounts Excel import in a much better way. And with the previous session that we did last Friday. So we'll be having one more session of Excel import, which will be capturing the SEZ part and the FX entries. So once the SEZ and FX entry is done, then we are good to go with stepping in with the inventory Excel import part. If there is any kind of query, confusion, you can always ask this, or you can just reach out to our support team anytime. And otherwise, we can take the queries in our next upcoming Friday session as well, because we'll be continuing the accounts Excel import session over there. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you so much.